Hoosier Tires is the world's largest race tire manufacturer. Today's guest, Saunders, is the Asphalt Oval Business Unit Manager for Hoosier Tire. With a racing background, a passion for motocross, and 2 sons following in his racing footsteps, how did Irish get to where he is today, and what is it like to be a business unit manager for a massive tire manufacturer? Let's find out. Welcome to the Cutting Edge Garage Podcast.
We're here today with Saunders with Hoosier Racing. 39 years with Hoosier Tire, is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's about what, after about 20, you lose count.
Yeah, and probably intentionally, I would think. You just don't want to stop counting those years.
It's been great years. Yeah, it's I think 39 years, getting ready to go on 40 years here. But I actually started at Hoosier when I was 16 years old, working on the dock. I was born and raised in Lakeville, Indiana here, and always been around motorsports. I was going to races with my parents when I was 6 months old. My dad announced at all the local racetracks around here, so I was kind of a racetrack brat all my life, and went to races all my life.
That's awesome. So right now you're doing, you're in charge of oval asphalt. Is that right?
Yeah, I do all the oval asphalt racing, anything that's asphalt racing with Hoosier, including the ARCA series, all the NASCAR modified cars, anything that does with that, and also overseeing we ventured out 3 years ago now into the off-road business with the moto business. So I'm doing all the off-road two-wheel stuff for Hoosier also, GNCC, motocross, supercross, and we're just now developing a new flat track tire for flat track racing also.
That's awesome. So walk us through some of the different racing genres that you've been involved with Hoosier, and what Hoosier brings to those different environments.
Well, I started out at Hoosier. It's kind of a weird thing. I started out in dirt racing right off the get-go, doing World of Outlaw racing back in 1980, 81. Following the World of Outlaws, I never really did much dirt late model racing, but did all the dirt World of Outlaw racing through the 80s. And then 1990 decided I wanted to do the asphalt. They needed somebody with the asphalt. Actually, in 1988, I did, it was called the Busch Grand National Series back then with Bob Newton. We went cup racing, Winston Cup racing back then in 88 and 89. And it was quite the thing where we were set up, our plant set up to do bias ply tires at that time only. We didn't have radial capacity to do radial tires. But back in 1994, we gave another shot at it. In 1994, it was very, very successful to the point where a lot of people don't know this, but it was us racing Goodyear. And Mr. France had went to Mr. Newton, the owner and the founder of Hoosier, and said, hey, I'll let you guys have the Busch Grand National and the Truck Series. Let Goodyear have the Cup Series. And Mr. Newton's like, nope, we're just going to keep racing them and we're going to go on. But it just got such a huge undertaking that we'd have to bring 2,000 plus tires to every event. And what you ran at this race this week might not be what you run at the next week. So it was just absolutely, it was great. It was a great experience, to do that. So that's why I was just involved with a lot of the asphalt stuff.
Now, we had I had the privilege of meeting you at the AIM Expo a few years back, and you probably felt sorry for us. We were obviously the rookies in the crowd, and you got all of the advertising hawks that are there, trying to get into your pocket, and you were kind enough to kind of help weave us through that, and that's really kind of how our relationship evolved. First and foremost, I'm grateful for that. Thank you, because you've been a tremendous help as we're trying to weave through, making the best decisions that we can, and your knowledge has been a huge benefit for us. So in addition to all the track stuff, you've got, and obviously not right now with COVID, but you're also doing a lot of trade shows and things like that as well, correct?
Oh yeah, for sure. We're right now, you saw that the SEMA show has been canceled, right? We have the PRI show that's getting ready to come up. And that's going to be interesting to see what happens with it. So,
you think it's going to go on? You think they're going to do it?
My gut feeling, when you go to the Hoosier booth, and I think I told you, Lee, how the Hoosier booth is. It's a 20 by 40 booth at PRI, and it's so packed in the Hoosier booth that we're outside. It's overflowing out into the aisles, talking to people. So there's no social distancing there, right?
Right.
So, my gut feeling is I don't think it will, but you never know. You know what's going to happen. So
Racers are die hard.
Oh, they are. We're involved in the racetrack up here also, right, in Plymouth, Indiana. Ed Kennedy, my partner with the track, and we were the first track in Indiana that got to open up without fans. We had a plan set up. Ed Kennedy owns all the Andretti indoor karting facilities in the country here.
Yep.
And he made a plan. We talked to the governor. We had a plan what we were going to do. We were going to do, the social distancing. We were going to do a lot of this different stuff. And actually, the health department, the county health department, we're going to have walk-through scanners that could scan your temperature, Lee, when you walk through. And Doc Hollum, he says, don't waste your money on those $25,000 scanners because you could have the virus and not have the symptoms, right?
Right.
So, but we've been very good about working with that, and so it's been good. We open up now. We can have 50% capacity at this, and it's worked out real well.
What is the overall impact of COVID been on the business?
Well, for Hoosier, when it first hit, I'll never forget. I was at the Indy Supercross, going to the Indy Supercross, and we're ready to go, Lee. I mean, we're gonna go racing, right? And the next thing you know, we get the call, we're not racing. So we ended up, April, May, it was pretty slow, nothing really happening. And then Lee, as soon as the 1st of June hit, it's like somebody opened the floodgates, and it was wide open. I mean, we had one of the best months we've ever had in the history of the company in June and July. Even though not everything is open, but what is open was really good. Our first night open at the racetrack, we had 142 cars in the pit area, which is crazy. It was almost unmanageable. But it has affected the business some, but we still been pretty good.
Walk us through anybody that's been around racing has to know at least the name and the brand of Hoosier, but may not necessarily know the history of the company. So walk us through, who is Hoosier and what have they brought to the sport of racing?
Well, Bob and Joyce Newton were the founders and the owners of Hoosier Racing Tire. Bob Newton, he was a racer himself, and the joke is that Bob always made his excuse why he lost races because of tires. So he got in the recap business back in the 50s, the late 50s, right? And he was having tires through the 50 or through the 60s and 70s, because like I say, I started working there in the 70s at Mohawk Tire over in Akron. Well, Mohawk, they closed their plant down, I believe it was in 1977. They closed it down. So he went to, Mrs. Newton, to Joyce, and says, Mom, we got to do something here. Either we're going to go ahead and mortgage the farm and the houses and everything we got. We're going to start our own tire company, or I'm going to have to go back to a factory job. And they did. They started their own company here in Plymouth, Indiana. The warehouse and corporate offices in Lakeville, Indiana. And, kind of like the rest is history. I mean, it's been very, very good,
And what kind of racing did he do?
Well, Bob was one of those guys that, he actually raced stock cars is what he did. He was an okay racer, right? I mean, he was an okay racer, but Bob was a very, very hard worker. Whatever it took to get the job done, that's what we did. And he instilled that into a lot of us that's been there for so long. He'd be to the point where he's like, hey, kid, I need you to get in this car and I need you to drive all night long to get these tires there so you can have them there the next morning. We didn't argue. We just got in the vehicle and we drove the van or whatever it was and got them there the next morning, So he was a very, very hard worker, and he never gave up. But he was a racer, and he understood what racers needed because he worked on them. I've always said that, when you make rules for sanctioning bodies, Lee, there's 3 things that you can make intelligent rules. Number 1, you have to race them. Number 2, you have to work on them to know how much time it takes. And the most importantly one, you got to write the checks for them to know what it costs to race them. But if you can do those 3 things, you can make very, very intelligent decisions on rule packages for sanctioning bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. It's much easier out of some people's mouths than it is in practice and some of those rules that they come up with.
Yeah, exactly. And but we've been very successful starting out with, like I say, in the dirt business, the asphalt business, um, drag racing, oval racing. We're into karting now, dirt and asphalt karting, four wheelers, off road four wheelers, ATVs. Just getting ready to get into the side by side business here, developing tires for that, the moto. So we've really branched out a lot. I've seen a lot of growth in Hoosier over all the 39 years that I've been there.
Now, your ethos is in racing, and that's pretty much where you guys stay. Is that fair to
Yeah,
say?
yeah, there was a time, I want to say back when we were cup racing, 88, 89, and 94. Um, it was General Tire, Continental, that owns us now. They're the owner of Hoosier. They went ahead and built a Hoosier street tire. Now, Lee, I'm gonna tell you what, it's like having SP tools become, tools for brain surgery, right? I mean,
Right.
that's not forte. So we knew that, and we let them go ahead. We tried to do that. We weren't very successful at that. Then we went ahead with Kelly Springfield, which is owned by Goodyear,
Yep.
and they built a tire back in 1994 and did street tires. But right now, we stick with racing. That's what we do. We do some private label stuff for some different things and some SBU business, but primarily all we do is race tires only. And we actually are proud to say that we are the largest race tire company in the world. That's all we do is racing tires.
That's awesome. Now, how is the company structured? Do you guys kind of get to do your own thing, being part of General, or is, we work with, the reason I ask is we work with a few companies that are subsidiaries of much larger corporations, and they're there in brand, but they're really kind of managed by Papa corporate that doesn't really necessarily know what that division of the business actually does, or who their customers are, or things like that. So what's it like for you guys working with General?
Well, I mean, it's different. Okay. If you needed a piece of equipment or something done, for to make the process better or do some R&D, it was real simple to go up in the corner office and sit down with Bob Newton and say, Bob, here's what I need. I need to have X amount of dollars to buy this piece of equipment. Now there's a lot of paper trail to go through, but it's one of those deals when Bob passed away first. Joyce has since passed away also, but I'll never forget. They took a handful of us in this room, and she says, I have decided to sell Hoosier Tire. And it's like one of those things, Lee, like you're like, she didn't really say that, right? She really didn't say that because Bob and Joyce had two boys and two girls, and they just really didn't. They knew that they couldn't help get the company back up to the next level, right?
Right.
So they ended up selling the company to Continental, and I'll never forget this when Jochen Etzel came in and he was talking to us. He says, "We want you to know one thing. We know nothing about racing or race tires, but we have bought a very good, profitable business that knows everything about race tires. So we want you to just keep doing what you're doing." And in the most part, they have.
That's
Um,
awesome.
but but there's just, Lee, there's just a little bit more paperwork that you have to go through to make this thing happen. But other than that, it's been pretty good. We've been able to expand, just like the moto stuff. So back in 2000 and yeah, we've been 2010 when Eric was paralyzed. My son was paralyzed racing motocross for Tony Stewart. We were real close right then to building moto tires then. And when Eric got paralyzed, it just kind of struck too close to home for Bob and Joyce. And they said, no, we don't want to do this. So after they bought Hoosier, a year after they bought it, I went ahead and revisited. Say, hey, what do you think about this? Sure, let's do it. So there we went ahead. That was, one of those things where they okayed, and we were able to go do the moto stuff now. So it's been good. I mean, it's been good. They're learning a lot from us. There's Farron Lubers, who he's been there, I think 40 years. He's been there. He oversees all the drag racing stuff. Neil Common, he's been there 30 some, low 30 years, something like that. He oversees all the dirt stuff. And then Bruce Foss, he's in the 30 range also. He oversees the road race stuff, but he is kind of semi-retired now. And Adam Batten, who's a young kid that's been there. I think Adam's been there almost 10 years now. He's kind of overseeing the road racing. But, Lee, there's nothing like having the experience and being out there and getting your hands dirty and doing it to learn the business, right? And we've got a group of young men that we're we're trying to make sure that they understand to build a tire. Got to understand how the car works and what the car needs. And that's
Right.
where I've been very lucky to be able to do that. And it's helped a ton.
So throughout that career, what would you say your biggest challenges have been?
It definitely was Winston Cup. There's no doubt about it. Not only just tire development, but politics also. There's a lot of politics in that racing. So I would say probably the Cup racing was probably my toughest challenge. With asphalt, Goodyear was the dominant tire in asphalt with bias ply tires for sprint cars, for the Northeast modifieds. And we had a very good compounder and a very good tire engineer that I worked with. They're still there today. And we just tackled these projects on our own. And we just, with Bob's blessing, we just worked hard enough, got ourselves with the right people that had the right equipment to win races and do development. And consequently, Goodyear went away. They couldn't compete anymore. So they just, kind of threw in the towel and said, we're done. So now it's all exclusive Hoosiers as they run in those series now.
So how do you go? Walk us through how you do that. So that's a complete reversal, basically, from they dominate to you kicked them out, basically smacked them in the mouth and took their business.
Well, it's a lot of hard work. We did an extreme amount of testing. I'm just going to use the modifieds for example, right in the Northeast. Of course, the Northeast people are very opinionated about things, as we all know, right?
I'm originally from Baltimore.
Yeah, but Lee, you're not that far. I'm talking about up in Connecticut, Massachusetts, up that area. So
Yeah.
you are an East person, right, Lee? So,
Yeah, and I'm not going to pick on those guys. Normally I would, but I'm going to leave them alone today.
Oh, I'm going to pick on them because most of them are all my friends up there anyhow, right? But we would go up there. They were very, nobody likes change in life, right? I mean, they were all used to running Goodyear tires. But we went up there. We got a couple of good teams that said, hey, you know what? I think I can give you an advantage by giving you a better product. And we just slowly but surely, we did development, built better products. Back then it was to the point where two things. You had to have a fast enough product to get yourself in the show because back then you could have 40 cars show up at an event and they only took the top, I'm just going to say maybe the top 20 that were locked in the show. So you had to have a fast product to get in the show, but you also had to have a product, Lee, that would have the longevity and never slow down and never back up, right? So we had to work really hard at that because we started out, we had the product that wouldn't back up, but we just couldn't get qualified. So we just kept working on it and working on it. I mean, we had a tire that was for a right front, and I remember to this day it was a 3-ply Kevlar tire we had on the right front. We probably had more in the tire than what we sold it for, but the thing could turn on a dime and give you 9 cents back. It was unbelievable. And we came out with that tire, and it really dominated. But it was just a lot of hard work and getting with the right people and getting with the right teams that had good equipment and could showcase the product.
That's a little bit different for each genre of racing, though, isn't it? Even on the asphalt stuff, what the drivers are needing out of the tire changes from track to track, from type of racing to type of racing.
Oh, absolutely. When we were open competition racing with Goodyear, at one point in time, Lee, we had all 4 tires on the car was a different construction. So the left rear was a different construction than the left front. The right front was a different construction. I mean, they were all different constructions for all the car, for all 4 corners on it, just to make the car so it would do everything it needed to do. So that was quite challenging. And in inventory, you got to remember those 4 tires. You might have, I'm going to say 4 or 5 different combinations with that type of scenario. So you had to really watch your inventory then also, and you had to make sure you had just enough for every event. So it was very challenging to make sure you had plenty of tires for every because you could go there one time and say, well, we got 10 guys and this is what I got to have for 10 guys. But NASCAR would mandate that you bring so many tires to every event so that you could fulfill the field. But man, just slowly but surely just started taking off, and we started getting guys. And at the very end, there was just a handful of Goodyear guys that were left, maybe 2 or 3 guys, and the rest of them were all on Hoosiers. So
That's awesome.
It was very challenging, yeah, for sure.
There's a lot that goes into tire technology. I don't, and I guess unless you've actually raced, you really, there's a lot of people that are going to be of different backgrounds watching this podcast, and not all of them necessarily come from a racing background. I had the opportunity to sit in on a race with Andretti last year in their IndyCar series, and sitting in the pits and watching the guys of what they're doing. After the pits, they're doing tire temperatures, and there's so much going on. And I had the opportunity to speak to Michael for a few minutes about the challenges that go into racing, and he said, racing right now is, less about the driver, and at least in their IndyCar series, less about the driver and more about the science and anticipating weather, and he told me the biggest thing was tires. It's when you pit, and what you can get out of the tires is the difference between winning the race and not placing.
Yeah, and what I found, Lee, I guess I don't want to say the younger generation, right? But back in the day, bias ply tires, radials, they're pretty much set. I mean, you have a certain amount of stagger, which the stagger is the difference between the right rear and the left rear that makes a car go in a circle, right? So it's sort of like taking that Coca-Cola cup and trying to push it in a straight line, it will want to turn. So bias ply tires, you are able to set your stagger, but the younger generation today, some of them, not all of them, but some of them don't want to work as hard. They say, oh, I got to have 3 inches of stagger, and all I got now is 2 3/4 inches of stagger. Well, you got to be able to shrink the left rear and maybe grow the right rear a little bit. And 2 pounds of air is going to be 1/4 inch in circumference of the tire. So you just have to work with it a little bit, But so many people just want to be like a radial. I'd love to have radials, Lee, for all short track racing. The problem is they couldn't afford it. They're so labor intensive to build radials that short track racing, it would hurt short track racing because not everybody can afford $400 or $500 tire, for, let's say $2,500 for a set of tires, right? You got the mom and pa out here at South Bend Speedway in South Bend, Indiana, that, they just want to sell that tire for, a 10-inch tire for $120, $125 or whatever it might be. So, but you have, there's a lot of work into it. You have to work on stuff.
So how did you come to work for Hoosier? What did you do before, and how did you get there?
You don't want to even know this one. So as I said before, I was 6 months old. I was going to races, right? My dad was announcing. At 12 years old, I started announcing racing at 12 years old. We were at South Bend Speedway, and as a race car brat, my mom, I was an only child, and I was spoiled too. I will say I was a spoiled only child. But I would go in the stands. Back then, you had a tape recorder, and when I'm 11 years old, 12 years old, I'm announcing the races into this tape recorder as my dad is in the tower announcing races also. So it just so happens there was a promoter. His name was Louis Freeburn, that owned Butler Motor Speedway in Michigan and South Bend Motor Speedway here in South Bend. I'll never forget. I went in his office with my dad and I. And he said, "I understand." He said, "You announce races." I was like, "Yeah, I do. I do it on my tape recorder on Friday nights here at South Bend." He said, "How would you like to announce with your dad?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that'd be great. Here I am, a 12-year-old kid. I mean, sure, I'm going to be with my dad." So when I was 12 years old, Lee, I started announcing races with my dad. So we did it together from 1972 until 1976. And my dad finally said, "You know what? You need to do this on your own. I'm going to back out." So I started racing. I started announcing racing full time by myself when I was 16 years old.
Wow.
I went through high school, graduated in 1978. So I'm telling my date, I'm my age now, right? So, but I graduated in 1978 from a local school here, where this house that I'm in right now is born and raised in this house all my life, right? And believe it or not, I went to work for Bob Newton on the dock in 1976 and 1977. So in the summertime, I was unloading trailers, spray painting the Hoosier on there, mountain tires, grooving tires, whatever we needed to do, I was doing it, right? And then I graduated in 78. In 1978, I went to work for a company called Holiday Rambler. It was an RV company. Of course, we're here in northern Indiana. It's the hotbed of the RV industry. And I worked there for about 6 months, and I'm like, boy, this factory, I don't know about this, right? So at that point in time, I was engaged to this girl. Her dad had a mobile home and RV sales lot. So I went into the RV business, and I was selling mobile homes and RVs. Well, you know how you do with women. You can't always keep them forever, right? So I split up with her, and Bob and I went to school with Bob Newton's that owned Hoosier's two daughters, Marge and Mary, and they had known that I'd split up with this gal, and they said, "Dad, Irish isn't he's not working at the mobile home lot anymore. Why don't you get him to come to work for Hoosier?" And I'll never forget, Lee. It was on New Year's Eve. I ended up going down and sitting with Bob Newton for 5 hours. Now the plant's closed down, right? Because he always used to close Hoosier down Christmas and New Year's for 2 weeks. Bob and I sit there and bench raced and armchair raced for 5 hours about what's going on and this and that. And he says, "I want you to come to work for me, doing my PR work for me." Well, Lee, I didn't know anything about PR, you know? I said, "I don't know anything about it." So, being Bob Newton that he was, he shot me a price that to come to work for him about half of what I was making working at an RV company, right? At the sales lot. I said, "Bob, I'm worth it more than that. I need more money. I got to have what I'm making now." Of course, Bob did the old, "Well, let me go home and I'm going to talk to Mother," which was Joyce, "and I'll let you know." So I knew no sooner, Lee, left Hoosier. I'm 2 miles from Hoosier. I got here to my parents' house. I was still living with my parents. I got here, the phone rings, and it was Bob, and he goes, "I talked to Mother. Can you start Monday morning?" He said, "We'll try it for 6 months. We'll see how it goes. And if it goes well, we just continue." So almost 40 years later, I'm still there.
Must
So
not have been a bad offer then, the second go around.
it was pretty good. It was pretty good. And I really I miss Bob every day because he gave you not only a lot of business advice but a lot of fatherly advice too on different things. I mean, Bob and Joyce were like my second set of parents that I had, and they did a lot for me. They did a lot for my family, a lot for everything. So it was
They
pretty
sound
cool.
like a great. They sound like a great uh, couple. Really
They, they,
do.
they were. If you ever get in Lakeville, Indiana, there's a place that's called Newton Park. Here again, it's Bob, right? He buys this piece of property. It's on the main road of State Road 4 and US 31, the main highway going, back then it was going right straight through Lakeville from South Bend to Indianapolis, right? And he looks around and he says, I'm going to build a park for kids." So we went and looked at this one park up in South Bend, really nice park, had 4 ball diamonds and a score box and everything, Lee. And I said, "This is pretty nice, Bob." He goes, "You know what? I'm going to build something better than this." He says, "As a matter of fact, I'm going to have the second Golden Dome in St. Joe County. The first Golden Dome in St. Joe County is Notre Dame." So he's got a dome in here with this, and he made it for these kids. And this soccer and baseball complex, it's Musco lighting. I mean, Lee, it shouldn't be in a little town of Lakeville, Indiana that doesn't even have but one stoplight, right? It should be in Chicago or a bigger metropolis than just Lakeville. So he built this and he made it. He says, "It's going to be just for kids. So if you're over 18 years of age, you don't play at Newton Park." And it's still that day. The family still have it. Margie, they still oversee that soccer and baseball field here in Lakeville.
That's awesome. We could probably solve a lot of the issues that we're dealing with today if we could go back to some morals and principles like that. Find more people that had morals and principles and values like that.
Yeah, you're right. And Bob and Joyce, they were very, very low key. Joyce did so much for people. I'll never forget when, and Bob had passed away in the little town of Lakeville. They got a bunch of new Christmas lights, right? And I was like, "Man, this is great. Look at the. I said, "Joyce, you see the Christmas lights?" She goes, "Yeah, I saw them." I said, "Joyce, did you buy those Christmas lights for the town?" She goes, "I wouldn't do nothing like that." But she did a lot of things for a lot of people, but she never wanted any attention. When Eric was paralyzed, there was a thing. It's called a track chair. It's a wheelchair and it's got tracks on it. And I'll never forget it. I talked to the owner of the company. He goes, "I'm going to send you one to try, and if you like it, we'll work you a deal on it and you buy it." So we used it for the summer. It worked pretty good. It actually stands him up. He actually can stand up, and the thing can still move while you're standing up, right, Lee? So got ready to buy it. I said, "Well, I'd like to know what the price is." He goes, "You don't have to worry about buying it." "What do you mean? It's been paid for." And I'm like, "Well, who paid for it?" He says, "The person said they didn't want you to know." Well, I found out at a later date, it was two people that bought it. It was number one, Tony Stewart, and number two was Joyce Newton. And Tony Stewart was like, Joyce was kind of like a mom to Tony. He already had his mom, Pam, right? But Joyce was like a mom, and Tony was like one of the sons that Joyce never had, right? So there was a really deep relationship between those two. And yeah, I mean, you look back on those kind of things, people just kind of don't do that stuff anymore. Pay it forward, I guess you might say, right? So
Yeah,
it's definitely different.
man, that's an awesome story. Um, Speaking of Eric's accident, how did that happen?
Well, Eric, I raced motocross. I've got to tell you, I raced motocross back in the 70s, right? With my father and my mother. We used to go every Sunday. Back then, we didn't race, but Saturday, just a Sunday. We'd load up and we'd go to the races, and I'd race motocross. Um, and when I got married and we had children, boy, you know what? It was a pretty good childhood for me to do this. And I've got three great children. I got Nicole, my oldest. She works in accounting at Hoosier. Eric, of course, my middle son, that raced motocross, and then Garrett, who didn't really want nothing to do with motocross. He was kind of like he'd ride pit bikes and really didn't care too much about it. But Eric he was riding motocross, and we were with American Suzuki. He was riding for Pat Alexander and Cole Gress from American Suzuki back then. We had our own test track here, full-blown test track to do testing with. And Eric had just turned pro at 17 years old, and it was the day before his 18th birthday. And I was actually down in Plymouth Speedway with my wife, Sheila, and we were there for a race for Hoosier. She was working in the concession stand helping some friends of ours that owned the track. And we got a phone call, and they said, Eric's been hurt. You need to get home right away. So he had crashed up here at our test track, and he was left. It was left him paralyzed from his chest down. They took him to Methodist Hospital in Indianapolis. They flew him down there. We spent 10 weeks in Indianapolis with him healing. I mean, he had his spleen was bleeding, punctured his lungs. He had a T5, T6 fracture separation, which left him paralyzed from his chest down. But that was, and they don't know it, but they think that maybe the device that he had to help from breaking your neck might have actually caused the paralysis. They don't know. It's speculation, right? But, you get all the ambulance chasers saying, hey, why don't you sue this company? You know what, Lee? We're racers. We understand racing is a very dangerous sport. And you're going to take those responsibilities and those risks of something like this happen, right? So, we got home here. It was the day before his 18th birthday that it happened. We get him back home here. And Lee, think about it. Is your house handicap accessible right now that you could take a wheelchair anywhere in it?
Nope.
We were the same way. So Eric is in Indianapolis, and he's going to come home in 2 weeks. And Lee, we're like, we can't. We don't have a roll-in shower. We don't have nothing here. What are we going to do? So I had a very good friend in Tony Stewart, and probably another guy you've heard of is Travis Pastrana, right? Those two got together, and they made stuff happen around here. So we made our whole house here handicap accessible, so Eric can go anywhere in his house and do anything in his house except for going down to the basement. So the
That's
house
awesome.
is 100% handicap accessible. Added on a big rec room so we could have plenty of people over. My wife comes from a very big family, so we have the holidays always here. So he's able to get have easy access with that. But a good friend of mine, Ed Kennedy, I think I told you about. He's partners with me in the racetrack at Plymouth. He called me one day. He says, "What are you going to do as a family to stay involved in racing?" I'm like, Ed, I don't know. We're just trying to get our life back to somewhat normality, try to figure out what's going on. I don't know. He said, well, they tried to sell that track at Plymouth up there, Indiana, to me a year ago, and I just wasn't ready for it, but I might be ready now. So it was March of 2011. He called me on my birthday, March 17th. That's how I got the name Irish, right? Born on St. Patrick's Day. And he said, happy birthday. I said, well, thanks, Ed. He goes, hey, I just want you to know I bought the racetrack, and I want your family to be my eyes and ears and see it. Great. Okay. When are you going to start, Ed? April 1st is going to be our first race. Now, this is the middle of March, right? So we got a lot of work to do. So we had the track, ran at Asphalt 1 year, got with Tony, decided we were going to run a dirt track on the inside of the Asphalt track, do dual racetrack. Tony ran it, won a race, and they said, what do you think of this little bull ring? He goes, I think it's a great race, but when I come back next year and dirt's all the way out on the big track, I'll be happy. And Lee, the place went crazy, and Ed looked at me and he says, I think they made up my mind. So we turned it to dirt. Garrett, my youngest son, who wanted nothing to do with racing, motorcycles or anything, we put him in a front-wheel drive car because when it was asphalt, he goes out his first race, Lee, and he wins it. And I'm like, where the heck did this come from? Because he didn't want nothing to do with racing. I would expect it out of Eric, right? Being a racer, right? But he didn't want nothing. I mean, he won going away. So then they rigged up it was actually Tracy Trotter that owns a company called Calico Coatings down in Charlotte. Does a lot of coatings. He was the first one. Him and Tony were the first one, more Tracy than anything, that got Eric a mini sprint, a micro sprint. And a gentleman by the name of Randy Sweet that does the steering, and Tommy that works for him, they rigged it up with hand controls in it. So Eric could race this car with hand controls. So he goes out with hand controls, and guess what, Lee? They're both racing. Eric's winning races now with hand controls. So we're like, okay, mini sprints are pretty cool. They're micro, they're 600cc motorcycle engines in them, but what about sprint cars, you know? Well, I didn't own my own company, and to go buy a 410 wing sprint car engine, you're going to spend $50,000-$60,000 for one. Well, that's not me, right? So, but we did have a crate series that we started, and Eric and Garrett both ran very well in that. Eric won it was the UMP National Championship. He won one year. I think he won maybe 10 out of 12 races that year that he participated in, and Garrett won also. So they race sprint cars. They have sprint cars now. 360 410s. We were able to find some help, and we got some 360 and 410. We got micro sprints still that they're running. So, you know what? We're back to the family racing. My wife Sheila, she runs a concession. Eric's racing. Garrett's racing. My daughter Nicole does registration and runs a beer stand. So every Saturday night we're a family racing together at a racetrack.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So the accident didn't turn you away from racing. It just, which it could do. Some people, bow out and say, hey, we're going to go do something else. Instead, you guys found a way to get even closer to it, sounds like.
Well, yeah. And, I just knew that Eric was very good. He had a gift-given talent to race and be able to give. He would give you 100% every time you race, Lee. Every time. I never had to yell at him. Maybe once in my life. I yelled at him one time because I said, Eric, you got to use the front brake going into the sand corner a lot more, right? He says, well, Dad, he said, you just show me because you can't do it. Well, I'm a grown guy, and I get on this 85 bike, and Lee, I haul off into the corner. I use the front brake. I flip over the bars. The next thing I know, I'm up in the race shop, sitting in a chair, and I got the dog looking me in the face. I mean, it knocked me down, right? So after that, I never questioned him riding a motorcycle after that. But I know
he didn't even have to say, see, I told you.
Oh, he's told me that a number of times now. He definitely lets me know about that, right? But he gave me 100%. He still does to this day. He doesn't know what to do to fix it, but he can explain it to where it needs to be fixed. And then if you're a good enough chassis guy, you can fix it. And that's where Garrett, my youngest, he's awesome. He's absolutely awesome with setups. He works really hard. He's kind of got from his dad that, you know what, you surround yourself with good people and good things happen. So we have a lot of resources. We get hell, I'm going to tell you right now, Lee, we got accused of cheating all the time. I never cheated ever. I mean, I would take the rules and go to the edge, but never cheated, because if Tony told me, he said, if you ever get caught cheating, he said, I want my name away from your racing. And I've never done it. Now, have I got resources that a guy by the name of Doug Wolfgang, who was a top sprint car driver in the country back in the day? I call Doug Wolfgang. I can call Donnie Schatz. I can call all these people, Tony, and say, well, Tony doesn't know too much about it. Tony's about like Eric. He don't know how to fix a lot of things, but boy, he can really adapt and he can race, right? But you have those resources that I've had over all these 40 years of being at Hoosier that I can go to, and that's what makes it pretty cool to be able to do this, And it don't matter if I was drag racing, I can pick up the phone and call Cruz Pentagon, right? And say, hey, Cruz, this is I've made so many friends in the industry, Casey Kane, Jeff Gordon. I remember Jeff Gordon, first time I worked with Jeff, he was 12 years old. His father, John Bickford, is the one that made Jeff Gordon, right? Jeff just had another one of those kids that had God-given talent. But John always made sure that Jeff had very, very good equipment. Where Tony Stewart, Nelson Stewart, they didn't have a lot of money, but Tony had passion, he had drive. And I can remember sneaking Tony into races that he didn't have money, or he'd sleep on the cot in my room, share a room with me, because he couldn't afford to get his own hotel room. But
he doesn't have to do that anymore.
I don't think so. I don't think
No,
so. I
no
think
cots in his future unless he wants to.
exactly. But you know what? You know what? I'll never forget something. I told him, Lee. I said, you know what, Tony? I said, I want you to remember this. You know, when you were going up that ladder of success, you know, remember, don't step on the people going up that ladder, because when you come on the way down that ladder, they're going to remember it. I said, and don't, whatever you do, don't ever forget where you came from. He said, I will never forget where I came from. He said, I will never forget what you've done for me. And so when Eric started racing motocross, Tony was right there right away just to say, hey, I want this to be Tony Stewart Racing. I want him to be part of my team. I want him to be part of Tony Stewart Racing. So that's where both boys still are to this day. So it's kind
That's
of like,
awesome.
he just gives back, he remembers where he came from.
Tell us a little bit about the track. Name of the track is, and you may have said it. If you did, I missed it. Was it Plymouth?
Yep, Plymouth Speedway, and it's www.plymouthspeedway.net.
Okay.
We got All-Star Circuit of Champions are coming in August the 22nd. We've been very fortunate that Ed Kennedy has invested a lot of money into this racetrack. The seats that he has in his thing, Lee, is amazing. So you remember when they took the seats out of the backstretch of Daytona International Speedway?
Yep.
So Ed bought the structure, bought all those seats out of there. So at Plymouth, in Little Plymouth, Indiana, the structure is out of Daytona. The seats that have backs on them, they all fold down seats, are out of Charlotte Motor Speedway. And there's an aluminum deck in front of all the seats that is out of Atlanta Motor Speedway. So we have 3 NASCAR venues at Plymouth Speedway for seating, right? And if you go on PlymouthSpeedway.net or you go on their Facebook page, you can see a picture of this. Ed brought in Musco lighting. He put in a Jumbotron now. He just got done ordering a whole new wireless camera system so he can have wireless cameras, and they're going to show on the Jumbotron and do interviews. So it's a pretty nice darn facility. And it's a dirt track, and we run every Saturday night. We run actually 5 classes. We don't run 4 per night, but 5 classes total with UMP modifieds, super street cars, thunder cars, non-wing 600 micros, and 4-cylinder cars. So, but it's a pretty neat place, and that's what we do every Saturday night. We're down at the racetrack, right?
Any idea on when they're going to start letting people back in?
Well, here's the thing. I can tell you, Lee, that when this all happened, I got deeper in politics than I ever wanted to. But
careful, you come out of that dirty.
Well, no, I mean it was good, all right. But there is a lot of politics involved in it. There's a lot of egos that are involved in things that you have to overcome. But I'll never forget, on a Wednesday morning, we have a very, 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 very good relationship with the county treasurer, who she is. She actually works at the pit gate. She volunteers her time on Saturday night. The county commissioner, the county health department. We have a very good relationship with them. So we were on a meeting with the governor on Wednesday morning. And that Wednesday afternoon, the governor of Indiana, Eric Holcomb, went on record and said, as of right now, racetracks in Indiana can open up with no fans. So Ed Kennedy, who he just bought a golf course up here, and besides all of his Andretti's, and he lives in Daytona, he bought a golf course up here in Plymouth, Indiana. He goes, we got to race this Saturday. I said, Ed, it's in 2 days. How are you going to do it? You have no fans. How are you going to pay the purse? Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to raise the ticket price to get in the back gate from $30 to $45, and we'll try to make it work. Well, that's what we did for a few weeks. And then pretty soon the governor was like, okay, things are going pretty good. There were some tracks that were, as Tony Stewart said, they were a Wild West show, no social distancing, elbow to elbow, and they were going to get everybody else in trouble. And those tracks got shut down. A couple of them got shut down, right? But we're at 50% capacity now. We can, and with Plymouth,
okay.
There's 4,000 seats that are at the racetrack, so we can bring 2,000 people in there. And 2,000 people, Lee, a lot of people don't know, but 2,000 people is a lot of people.
In a small area, it sure is.
Oh man, Lee, I find that I think everybody when they see a crowd at a racetrack, I think they're cross-eyed when they're looking at it, because it's always double what really is there. If there's 500 people, they say, oh, there's 1,000, 1,500 there, but there's only 500, right? So we had the World of Outlaws in 2 weeks ago. It rained out. They're going to come back in September again. But there was like 2,020 people that was in there. So I called the county commissioner and I said, hey, I got to apologize. We were 20 over. He goes, 20 over is not bad. He said, but what I like about it, you guys are doing all the right thing. You take temperatures of people when they come in, make sure they don't have a fever. You got sanitized areas all the time. The employees, we highly recommend to wear a mask. It's not a law, so you can't really enforce it and make it mandatory. So we do everything we can to minimize the spread of corona. So it's been a little different. It's been a little challenging, but we've had believe it or not, the track's had a very, very successful season so far this year.
Awesome. Well, Irish, I'm really grateful that you took time out of your schedule to be with us today, and we're looking forward to getting out and spending some time with you out at the track. Jesse and I both want to get up there and check out the track and catch a race.
Well, we definitely want to. And I'll tell you what, for those of you that's never had SP tools, I'm going to tell you right now, when I saw those tools, we were at that show, at that Ames Expo down here, I looked over there, Lee, and I said, those things look like they're just badass. I mean, they just got that wow factor when you look at them. And I didn't know who you were, Lee, at that point in time, but I liked the way the product was. We get the product. It's great product. It's a good price. You back your service. So, I share it all the time on my social media all the time because I really believe in the product. I got a friend of mine, Cruz Pendergon. He's a Snap-on guy, right?
Yep.
But I told him, Cruz, I said, I've used Snap-on stuff, but I'm telling you, this stuff is every bit as good as Snap-on. I said, and you have a great relationship with the company. I said, they take care of anything. I said, and not only that, the stuff looks sexy. I said, everybody wants to look good at a racetrack. So I'm a 100% supporter of SP Tool. I can tell you that right now. And your company, your people there have done a great job. And I'm telling you, if people have never went to SP Tools, they got to do it. Because, here I am. I could probably go to Snap-on, or I could go to Craft, I could go to wherever, but I just firmly believe, and this is no paid advertising, trust me, but the product is just a great product. And it lasts, and it holds up. We had one wrench, I think, or one set of Allens that might have broke the head off, but guess what? The first thing your son says, hey, send it back here. We'll take care of it for you. Yeah, guess what? He gives it an Allen. He took care of it. But that's the kind of people you guys are. And that's why I think SP is going to be very well known here. It is being, I think it's growing pretty darn fast, it looks like, because I see more of it out there. And not just in all types of racing, whether it be motocross, flat track racing. You got a fast track racer that's in there, sprint car racing. We've got the racetrack here. We're doing a program with SP there where if you have perfect attendance, guess what? Your name goes in a hat. You got a chance of winning an SP toolbox at the end of the season, which is great, But they got to have the decal on the car. But it's been such a crazy year this year, I just hope we get back to normality here very, very soon.
Well, we're humbled and grateful for the help and support, and definitely, your opinion of the product and the team mean a lot to us. So again, humbled and grateful.
Well, again, you guys have been great. Again, if go to SP Tool USA, on Facebook, and like them, you'll get the update on the new things. I got to ask you though, I just saw it the other day about the air gauge. You got the new
Yes.
double down air gauge.
Yes.
It might be good that we get with Hoosier, and when we go to all these events, maybe we have SP Tool air gauges at all these NASCAR events and the ARCA events that we go to, And
That would be awesome.
So maybe we need to talk about them getting air gauges and working with that, because, again, I'm every time I see that, it's like, you're kidding me. They got one of those? I never knew they had one of those. So people need to go to your Facebook page, because you guys do a very, very good job of informing people of new product that's coming out and the way things work. And I think it's great. Absolutely great.
Awesome. Thank you, Irish.
Yep, you bet.
Well, guys, thank you for joining us in the Cutting Edge Garage, and we'll see you again soon.